ASME Queensland forum on preparing for external examination. If you have just been attending the QCAA webinar, well done for doubling up. You're champions. Firstly, we acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet and pay our respects to leaders and artists past, present and emerging. So my name is Dr. Malcolm Cole. I'm head of the Faculty of Arts at Cannon Hill Anglican College. I'm a confirmer for music extension and also an external exam marker, external assessment marker. So today's forum came about from a request by a senior music teacher on how she would be interested to hear how other schools are preparing their students for the EAs in music and music extension. So I'm very pleased that we have 5 excellent senior music teachers who have prepared presentations to share with fellow teachers on how they are navigating into this new territory. Our presenters today are Liz Pratt, Janette Kelly, Meagan Pearse, Shane Tooley and Jason Goopy. Each will present for around 7 to 8 minutes, which will allow for a question or comment or two at the end of each presentation. The forum is being recorded and will be available on the ASME website Professional Development tab. So let us begin. So our first presenter today is Liz Pratt. Elizabeth has been working in a number of settings, but has worked at Cannon Hill Anglican College for 18 years. She achieved her Masters from the University of Queensland and in 2011 received the National Award for Excellence in School Music Education. She was head of faculty here at CHAC for the last 8 years and has held a senior leadership position as Director of Senior Secondary. Elizabeth is still involved in the college's choral program and has really enjoyed taking the current Year 12 music and music extension classes through this first iteration of our new syllabus. Her presentation aims to focus on a slightly different angle as we enter the final stages of preparation for the external exam. So I hand over now to Liz. Thank you, Liz.
Thank you so much, Malcolm. I'm going to share my screen so you can see my PowerPoint. Here we go. I'm hoping that you can see that very soon. And from beginning. There we go. All right. So, good afternoon. My name's Elizabeth. I'm a music teacher at Cannon Hill Anglican College. I'm currently teaching both Year 12 music and music extension. I've not been involved in any syllabus writing. I'm not a confirmer. I'm not an endorser. I've never worked at the QCAA. Previously, as Malcolm said, I have been a head of faculty in a DPRC. I do actually have a senior leadership role within our college. I'm the Director of Senior Secondary here at CHAC, and I've prepared hundreds of students for the QCS test. As part of that role and experience, this afternoon I'd like to present hopefully a slightly different angle, and that is to discuss brain and mental health needed to ensure that our students are test ready, and also some other suggestions for test taking. So, while this may seem an obvious thing to say, for the students to be test ready, their brain and mental health have to be in the best shape possible. There are 4 brains, from cerebellum, the primitive or survival brain, fight, flight or freeze center, through to the frontal cortex, which needs to be firing for the students to have their best possible chance in these types of assessment pieces. We know that the teenage brain will not function efficiently if it is not well rested, it is not well fed, it is not sufficiently hydrated, is drug affected, is distracted, both during exam and in preparation for the exams, is on high alert. At my school, we address brain functions in great detail in our exit preparation program and even practice meditation exercises in our life and faith lessons. As classroom teachers, we can also assist, even if many of these factors are beyond our control. One thing we can definitely assist with is the calming of the brain in stressful situations, just like these high stakes examinations. So, in order to prevent our students going into the brain 1 sphere before and during the external exam, we can create conditions in which the students feel safe and calm. Establishing a sense of familiarity around the exam is of vital importance. I would strongly endorse the use of mock exams and administer these under the exact same conditions, from using the same venue to reading out the directions of administration. Another initiative I found most helpful when administering the QCS test was to have a don't panic station outside the exam room. I usually had a pastoral staff member there with pens, pencils, highlighters, water, and maybe for the music exams that we're coming up to, maybe even some extra wired headphones. Some students can quickly spiral, and putting something as simple as that in place can prevent such stress. This is just an example of a strategy that can contribute to achieving a calm and safe environment. I'm in a privileged position to be able to ensure that such measures exist at my school because I do have that role as Director of Senior Secondary, and you may not have those same opportunities or access to having those decisions. So what can you do in a classroom? I would recommend the following. Start each lesson with music making. Don't lose the joy just because we're preparing for an external examination. I would also recommend focus on this "we are in this together" angle. Model a positive attitude towards the EA. If you say things that are going to be, I guess, negative about the whole experience, they will take that on and definitely absorb it. And don't always be overt with the external examination preparation. Okay. Again, in my exit preparation program, we've included strategies from an organisation called the Learning Scientists. I know that many schools do this as well. This was endorsed at QCAA Leaders Forums that I've attended. I don't actually have the time this afternoon to explain this, but I would encourage you to have a look at these strategies, and it's very easy to search, just type in Learning Scientists. While you can't specifically study, as in learn formulas, etc., in our subject areas, I strongly believe that the students need certain facts at their fingertips. These include the music elements and, more importantly, their descriptors, music terminology, instrument names, excuse me, and knowledge of clefs, knowledge of key signatures, intervals, how to determine modulations. In my class, this is a non-negotiable. I would recommend using Kahoots to test music terminology, have students write out the circle of fifths at the beginning of lessons, mix it up, have some fun with this. As underlined in the QCAA webinars, the exam is an analytical essay. The students need to understand what that is and how to analyse effectively. Which brings me to the cognitive verbs. Here's an example of a class activity I conducted recently. The students had to write out verbatim the QCAA definitions of the cognitive verbs that were obviously present in some of those sample assessment items and what we know that are mapped in the arts section. And remember that they need, and then they had to explain it in their own words and how it applies to music. That was quite a time-consuming exercise, but I thought it was really important. I got some excellent feedback there from the students, as you might be able to see, because this was from one particular student. They need to remember that they have to answer the question, and to do that, they have to understand the cognitive verbs. After studying the available sample assessments, I feel that there is a lot of information for the students to wade through at the beginning of the exam. For some students, this may provoke a brain one reaction. To help students remain calm and in control, I am sending my students into the exams with a strategy. In this exam, they are required to make many decisions. I want my students to go in with purpose and a plan. We will be practicing over the coming weeks, and I have no doubt that the students will refine my strategy to best suit them as individuals. The other benefit of having a plan is to assist with time efficiency. So there you go, Mrs. Pratt's suggested strategies. And I've got there developed to ease decision-making stress and to maximise time efficiency. So here is my 12-step program. There are reasons behind all of them. I have the students reading the question first, so when they go through the contextual information, they have a better idea of what is and what isn't important in that information. I don't know whether you've seen it, but the music extension sample, the one that's available to public, all the contextual information there, you would not want to read all of that text any more times than absolutely necessary. Does anybody know that particular one that I'm talking about, the examples from Stephen Schwartz's Godspell?
Yeah.
There is so much text there. So that's why I think they need to read through the question first and then do that. Have a highlighter ready to go. Word count. This is definitely a tip that I've got from administering the QCS test. Never, never count every word in an exam. It's an absolute time waster. What you need to do is take from the middle of the essay about 5 lines. Don't go at the beginning because students tend to write smaller, and then at the end there, the words are rather large. And then what you do is that you multiply, count the amount of lines and you've written, find the average, multiply that by the amount of lines, and then you'll get, because there's a 200 word leeway, make sure you do that. It's horrible to watch students waste time doing that. The aspect of my class teaching that I think is the most valuable and important is our group work. And more than that, the sense that we are in this together. I would often refer to this when preparing students for the QCS test. I loved using a particular video to illustrate the point. I've got the link in that particular slide, and the video shows a family of penguins defeating a killer whale. Back in the olden days, that was a QCS test. Now it can be the external exam. I have found the sharing of student work as well to be only positive thing. For students who are less capable, I approach this with sensitivity. I'm the one who picks and chooses what to put up on the collaboration page. Many schools are now using platforms such as Microsoft Teams and OneNote, and this allows easy facilitation of this. The other day, the students had to come up with a thesis, just a draft thesis, and everyone is putting that up on the collaboration space. And because we've been doing this now for 2 years, they feel really that it's a safe environment. But every student benefits from that, in my view. In closing, I would like to encourage you to model the calmness that your students are going to need for the external exams. Keep dropping into the conversation the importance of sleep and exercise. Continue to enjoy music making within the classroom, and of course, cherish the time together as a class. Done.
Thank you very much, Liz, for that wonderful presentation. There's so many things to think about there. We'll have to go back and look at your slides in more detail. Does anyone have any question for Liz at all? We've just got a couple of minutes before the next presenter. If not, we can always email if you're thinking of something later. So thank you so much, Liz. And we might move on to Janette Kelly now. Janette Kelly has been teaching music in Queensland secondary schools for over 30 years. She developed an extensive performing arts department at the Glennie School in Toowoomba, and since then has been head of department at All Saints Anglican School and currently at St Hilda's School on the Gold Coast. Janette has been the chair of both the QSA Toowoomba and Gold Coast District Music Panels, president of the Toowoomba Executive Committee, and on the founding board of directors of Toowoomba's Empire Theatre, beautiful theatre. Janette was also involved in the development of both the 2004 and 2013 senior music syllabi and the respective revision of the 2008 music extension syllabus. In 2015, she was part of the QCAA Senior Curriculum and Assessment Music Working Group and is now a lead endorser and confirmer for the new QCE. Janette was a recipient of an Australian Government Quality Teachers Program's Recognition of Excellence in Teaching School Music Education Award in 2007 and is an active member of ASME Queensland and has been secretary tirelessly for many years. And we thank you for all of those years' work, Janette. Co-convening the 2011 National Conference held on the Gold Coast, which was a wonderful event, and currently being secretary of the ASME Queensland chapter. And she has always been addicted to music theatre. So welcome, Janette. And
thanks, Malcolm. I'll just attempt to share this screen now. Kangaroo is there. Why is the kangaroo there? There we go. I'll just make it a bit bigger. Now, anyone would think that Liz and I had actually planned this, because Liz's was a really great overview, and I'm going to go into more detail on one particular aspect of that. And we did plan it, didn't we, Liz? So this was a plan of attack that I started to develop last year for the then year 11s who are at our school start unit 3 in term 4 of year 11. And at the end of term 4 in that exam block, they did a mock exam, which I'm sure a lot of you have actually done. So that was their first attempt at, having the 2 hours, 20 minutes to devise a response to something that they had never seen before. And it was a really great learning exercise for them, because it really is it's a large task to get their heads around. So recently I've expanded upon this, and so this is my plan of attack as it currently stands, and it keeps getting revised and added to, not only from my thoughts from doing various webinars and things, but also from their comments as well. So my step 1 is to read the task question very carefully and read specifically what it asks you to do. And then I've put recommended time here for them to actually do this. And so I was suggesting to them approximately 5 minutes of their 20 minutes planning time. And in that, they need to know that the task may ask you to refer to 1 or 2 stimulus in your response. Check that you understand what this is. Like, is it asking you to compare elements, concepts within one work? Is it asking you to compare the same element across 2 works, or what, right? So that they know exactly what they're doing. And then secondly, in this reading the task, they need to establish very clearly in their minds the viewpoint that they will have to evaluate. And in my brain, that the question they will have to rephrase as a statement. So that will then become their viewpoint. And then they need to read any contextual details that they've been provided to connect these to the actual viewpoint. So after I probably need to add into there, obviously, to make their choice, because that's a pretty obvious thing, but I think they know they need to make their choice. I might say that aside from this plan of attack, we're obviously going through what does it mean to analyse, what does it mean to explain, and what does it mean to evaluate. But we then looked at analysing, explaining, evaluate the next 15 minutes of their 20-minute planning time, plus perhaps another 30 minutes of their working time. And I always get them to draw up a table for the whole work and get them to, first of all, in what they're looking at, get some type of a structure within that piece or pieces that they are examining. And in anything that they write, I always ask them to do structure form first, so that then that will help them to sequence what they're going to write about later when they select the music elements or concepts they're going to write about, so they can have it following logically on, and this will hopefully help their literacy skills in expressing that sequence and contextualization. Then obviously they're not going to be referring to every music element, but I've just put that there as that is their choices. They will probably be narrowing it down to, I'm thinking 2 elements if the question doesn't specifically say anything. This has been a bit of a bugbear of mine that all of the sample ones don't actually say how many elements to address, whereas all the EAMGs actually talk about have they dealt with 2 music elements in detail and no more than that. So my guidance to them is that if it doesn't say a specific number of music elements or concepts, don't touch any more than 2, because you won't be able to get that depth that you need to do. So they obviously pick what they think is the best elements to deal with. And we've been doing some cold kind of practices. We play a piece of music and I go, as you listen to this and follow the score, think about what 2 music elements would you hone in on that you think you can find enough evidence to support your viewpoint to say this expresses this certain meaning. So we've been doing a lot of cold listenings and following scores of that. So I've then got there probably what I've already said. Yes, analyse the form of the work. Select music elements and or concepts to analyse in detail, considering the question. how many music elements and or concepts does it ask you to refer to for each stimulus? If the question doesn't specify clearly the number, choose only 2 to allow you to respond with adequate depth. What music elements or concepts seem to provide you with the most depth of evidence to support your viewpoint? And then within sections, listen to the work section by section over and over again. And that's the advantage of actually working out the structure first. So then you can hone in on a particular bit, a little bit at a time, and chunk it so that you're really getting familiar with each section. And then E, analyze, explain how and why the composer may have made these choices for each music element in connection with the viewpoint, and evaluate these choices with reference to the viewpoint. So then my next recommendation, 3, is to actually plan your essay. For 15 minutes, work out from all of this analysis that you've done, work out an introductory paragraph that identifies the questions, stimulus material you're using, establish your viewpoint by stating it clearly. And then explain the structure of the work for clarity of references later in your writing, so that there's actual point-outable points within the work that you can hang the rest of your writing on. And then C, it's their decision. They need to decide how they're going to present the rest of their findings. Either are they going to discuss it section by section, discussing both or musical elements concepts within that section by section, or are they going to discuss it by music element across the 2 works? And each of them has a different opinion on which way they prefer to do it. And I point out to them, depending upon the works, one way might be preferable to the other. And that might be a decision you have to make actually on the fly in the exam room. So my thinking is that if they've done all that preparation, they should be able to smash out their essay with all of their analysis notes in 45 minutes of working time, writing, and not having to plan. They've done all that planning and they've got all their examples that supports their judgments and all those types of things. And then 5, that they proofread in the last 15 minutes of their working time. So that's kind of like my little how to chunk things and how to approach that 2 hours, 20 minutes that they've got to actually achieve an analytical essay by the end of that 2 hours and 20 minutes. And they're not just writing randomly straight away. I think there was a suggestion in the external exam that, you know, perhaps they could write an essay and then rewrite it neatly. I'm thinking, how could you have time to do that when you haven't even analysed it first and worked out what supporting arguments you're going to use, what you've actually found in your analysis and need to explain, etc., etc. So I definitely won't be suggesting that one to my students. I don't think they need to even think about that one. So this is my own personal way of suggesting how they approach their external exam. Next week, we're going to do a mock in class, and we're going to go through all of this again at the start of the week, and then 2 to 3 lessons to just get them day by day to work through another one. And then in 3 weeks' time, they've got their mock examinations, and then obviously we might do a few more mocks after that.
It'll be mock around the clock.
Yeah, definitely.
Thanks very much, Janette. That's a very interesting point that you raise about writing out a good copy, because that was kind of the school I was at. That was the viewpoint about the writing task for QCS. That you would have something that you've written out, and then you write out a good copy. So does anyone have another opinion on that as well? Because I think that's the points you raise are very important, Janette.
Sorry, I'll unshare. Yeah, okay. I just thought that like the writing task was a little bit different to something that like our task where, you know, you've got these unseen stuff. It's not just a stimulus and you can go off on your own tangent because there's a rainbow picture. Yes. It's not like a composition. Yeah, it has to be related to exactly what they see
and if we look at in-depth analysis and evaluation, that takes time. So thank you very much, Janette. That was a very clear presentation. Thank you. And also Miriam and Wendy put a note in about at the EA webinar that Beck did mention, if it asks for 2 elements, only refer to 2 elements, or if it, I think Wendy said if it says plural, that means 2.
Yeah, I spoke to Beck about that and I asked her that question and she wouldn't repeat that to me. So I was asking for confirmation of does plural mean 2? And she didn't, she hedged around that.
Okay. So thank you very much, Janette. Our next presenter is Meagan Pearse. Meagan is currently Specialist Senior Teacher of Music and Music Extension at Churchie, Anglican Church Grammar School. Churchie is an Anglican all-boys Peter 12 school in East Brisbane. She has been teaching senior music and music extension for over 15 years in co-educational and all-boys settings and has experience as a district and state panellist for music. Meagan has extensive experience in director and head of faculty roles and is currently Chief Confirmer for Music Extension and Lead Endorser for Music. She was involved in the development of the 2013 music syllabus and was involved in the development of the current music extension syllabus as well. Meagan is also completing her PhD researching how males and females teach and engage all boys in music making. If you currently teach in an all-boys school and will be happy to share your experiences and approaches in an interview, please contact Meagan. A little plug there for Meagan.
Yeah,
so
thank you.
I'll hand over to Meagan without any further ado.
Cool. Hey, everyone. I'll just share my screen. So I was actually thinking this time that, I don't know about you, but my year 12s here, they're really struggling at the moment, you know, with the lockdown and all the things that have happened, all their live performances and things they've worked their butts off to be able to participate in have been cancelled. So my approach to preparing them for the external assessment, really, it needs to be fun. And I'd want to poke my eyes out if I was just doing written work for like the next 10 weeks. So this is my approach. I started by, you know, putting down what are the assessment objectives, both for music and for, hang on, let me change extending my screen, and for MEX, obviously. So I needed to have them in my head and not a silly idea when you're thinking about activities. So here's some of the things that I've just brainstormed, and same with Janette and same with Liz. A lot of these are developing over time and I'm working on repertoire to work. So the first thought is, how do I do this practically? And my theory is to do this. Give them a theme. One day they can compose or improvise variations on the theme. I may even specify what elements I want them to use, because we all know from the external assessment samples that sometimes they specify an element and then one other. So we want to make sure that they can actually respond if I give them a specific element. And then I'd follow that with a timed handwriting exercise. I'm not sure what your students' handwriting looks like, but my students look a bit terrifying. So I think part of the external exam is to make their handwriting legible. And I'm only going by, I did the QCS marking training many years ago. And that was one of the things that was brought up, is that you have to be able to read it. So that's one idea. And the other thought is you can extend on that and say, well, what were you trying to communicate through your variations? So then I moved across to motif. Give them a motif, or as a class, we could even compose one. I've got some pretty creative boys in there. And this one actually has a focus on sequences. So using sequence, develop the motif, and then consider what meaning can be communicated through that use of sequence. I think if they're making their own or experimenting with them, they're more likely to hear it or see it in music that might be presented to them on the exam. And this time I take it from there to, you know, research and share examples of music with sequences throughout time. And we have Schoolbox here, so it'll press like Moodle or Blackboard or things like that. So I'll use a Schoolbox forum where they can share their examples or YouTube links or sheet music, and I would expect them to be able to provide specific timestamps or bar numbers to, you know, hone us into where that is. And that's part of that, preparing them to justify their response. And the next one is modulation. I will write them myself. I haven't done it, but it's on my list, to provide 2 different musical phrases in different keys and get them to perform, compose, or improvise the transition between each phrase in different keys. They'll need to explain how they used pitch and all its related concepts to modulate. Then they can have a think about how can modulation be used to communicate meaning, identify modulation in repertoire, and what meaning is communicated in their work, their transition between the 2 different phrases. And they'll need to evaluate and justify why. So there's those. Then we come over here. I was thinking about mood flipping. Once again, have a little bit of fun. Learn a popular sad song and use the music elements and concepts and flip the mood. I'm sure we've all seen the Scary Mary Poppins, and they flip them backwards and they make Frozen and lots of others scary. I thought, well, let's flip it the other way around. They'll need to explain how they use the music elements and concepts to do that and perform it as an ensemble. Just a little extra performance, could be at lunchtime, doesn't even have to be, but time-wise, it's a hard idea. Then I had this really silly idea, and I'm telling you this because I'm all about making it fun. La Cucaracha is the cockroach, and personally, it's a very upbeat song for a creature that is just creepy. So I thought it would be kind of fun to get them to give a go at La Cucaracha. If you look at the history behind it, there's some funny, possibly inappropriate to female kind of historical underpinnings. But if you just went by these lyrics, you'd be fine. So that was one idea, is to take that piece and flip the mood to be creepy cockroach. Then I've got FEMEX. So you like my little symbols, and X, FEMEX, that was my theory. Same but different. So how do musicians communicate meaning in different ways? Looking at, my boys have already done this, Gurumul and Paul Kelly's version of Amazing Grace alongside the traditional hymn. So here at Churchy, in Year 9 religion, I know because I taught it last year, they actually study Amazing Grace and the history that led to that poem and then the song. So the boys already have a background in it, but talking about how Gurumul and Paul Kelly worked together to do their version, let them talk about the meanings communicated and different meanings altogether. Then Disturbed's cover of Sound of Silence, which I love, and a lot of my boys, because they're rockers, like it too, and compare that to Simon and Garfunkel's Sounds of Silence, and how do they communicate meaning in different ways. So I think it's the same meaning, just done very differently, and evaluate to what extent is one more effective than the other, or how have they been used for different purposes to communicate different meanings, and examine the purpose or underpinning factors or history that may have influenced the use of music elements or concepts. So the idea of song lines is pretty cool in Gurumul and Paul Kelly's, that idea of moving forward together. So that's quite a good one to provoke discussion there. Then the other thing I've done is genres and styles. So same meaning, different styles. They can, using experimentation, perform or compose music in different genres and styles that communicate the same meaning. And then I will get to this, I've called them timed written response, which if we look at the research, and I know this is a lot of words here, but there's a lot of research out there. It's usually used for creative writing and literature, English language skills, but I don't see why it can't be such a bad idea for music. And even my own PhD sort of studies, sometimes it's just write your thinking, just put it down on paper. It doesn't have to be in any order, get it out. So what I've got here is a list of things that I've come across over my time. So Amy Shattuck, she's got a series on analytical essay writing. They're just YouTube videos. She's Australian, which I think is helpful. I think New South Wales, I can't remember off the top of my head. Sometimes that's just really nice to go back and refresh, like the hamburger idea, and she's quite good at explaining it, and they're short videos. So something, even if it's just to provide your students for studies. And I do come from a Catholic education background, so I've moved on from butcher's paper, but I do like the post-it note idea. And the website I've put there has some really creative ways to use sticky notes. And the boys in particular love that sort of, they get up and walk and it's movement and it's a bit more energetic than just individual all the time. So I've got ideas where, you know, the analysis of music elements, what do you hear? Just write it down on Post-it notes, and then we can all put it up on presentation paper and have like a gallery walk. Peer editing is also very useful. So if we do some timed writing exercises, then they can share their work and boys can post-it notes on each other's work. Collaborative brainstorming, where we all just work together and write down everything we can think. Because I think sometimes it's just like these forums. By me listening to what Janette and Liz has had to say, I've gone, that's really clever. So I can then apply that to my own teaching. I think our students are the same, that they each have their different areas of strength and share their strengths, and others learn just by default. And then the other thought is writing and sharing their viewpoints about the music. And the other idea I like is stop and jot. I control the music play. They'll need to obviously follow the score and listen to the music, and I'm going to stop it at certain points. They need to jot down what they see or hear at that particular time. And part of that is I know what they should be looking for if they're going to communicate, or if the piece is communicating a certain meaning. So in a sequence of ideas, that might be one of the first sort of little activities I do. And then timed writing, I'm nearly finished. If you have a look at this website, it's American, but it gives some ideas about how you could use timed writing. So I thought, if we've done this Post-it note activity, analysed music, then I'll give them 30 minutes. I'll give them the viewpoint. Now, you know, analyse, evaluate all those cognitive verbs in 30 minutes. See how well you can do in 30 minutes. And then we go and we build back on that. And there are different ways, like Liz is talking, and even Janette, about how we learn and how we plan. So hence the next one, metacognition. I like the idea of metacognition, and I can't bias, I was part of the music extension syllabus, but I do like the idea of them understanding how they learn, what they need to know, and how they're going to go about learning it. And I think that's really important, because how I sit an exam is going to be very different from the person next to me. So I think we need to do some exploration in how do I plan? Does mind mapping work? Does tables like Janette's, does that work? How do we plan out our essay structure in our head? And then do some activities in the 20-minute planning time, set 20 minutes. And in that time, they have to read the questions, listen to the repertoire, decide what they're going to do, plan their essay. And basically what Janette was teaching, but I just thought I'd do 20-minute planning time. And I guess my last thing, and I've put this up here because I'm not spruiking them at all, but we've trialed them this year. Sometimes I think you need to go old school. You need to they need to know the fundamentals, how to work out a key signature, how to work out if it modulates, what to look for. So we've tried the year 12s this year have grade 4 and 5. The year 11s have grade 3 and 4. They're okay. And next year, I think we're going to try Helen Galettis, her music elements and concepts. She's in New South Wales too, but she uses mind maps. They're really amazing. So I just thought I'd put that there. And obviously, coming back, through Schoolbox, we can create multiple choice quizzes that are just theory with, you can add video, audio files, and just multiple choice. So I thought I'd do them sequentially over time. And yeah, this isn't finished, but I've started to sort of work out what they're going to do over the little bit of weeks left. The reason I'm starting it official for next week is we chose to keep IA3. I thought it was important that they actually had a practice doing musicology before the external assessment. And boys, it's assessment, so they're quite serious and focused about it. So that just worked for us. But that's me.
Meagan, that's a fantastic presentation, showing practical application as well as planning, all sorts of things. You've squeezed a lot in there. Thank you very much. We'll move on because the time is moving on. So our next presenter is Tooley. Shane is at Downlands College in Toowoomba, and his role there is curriculum leader in the arts. Shane has been teaching senior music and music extension for 18 years, and his QCAA roles have included, he was a past district review panel chair for music and music extension in Toowoomba, learning area reference group member for the arts, and he's currently a music lead confirmer and a music extension EA marker. So welcome, Shane.
Thank you, Malcolm. Hi, everyone. I think a lot of what I'm going to talk about has been covered and stolen and so far, but I think we're all on the same track, which is really nice. I've actually probably picked up a little bit on what Elizabeth's done as well. So our context is, obviously, as I'm the leader of the arts, we've approached it as a department. We have a number of kids that do 2 or 3 art subjects. So most of my class either do drama or film and TV as well. So what we've been trying to do is build a consistent set of resources that allow all of our kids to get the same sort of information. So we've been trying to work on keeping everyone on the same page where we can share common ideas across the arts. Obviously, having worked in the learning area reference group as we built everything, when the new syllabus came out, I was sort of sitting and could see how we were trying to draw, keeping things in the arts family together, so that I'm trying to cut down on the kids getting different pieces of information for the same thing, particularly given that we teach them for at least 2 subjects usually. So first thing I'm going to share is a presentation I've done for them. And so this is all of everyone in my faculty is doing one of these. So we have a music one, a dance one, a drama one, a visual art one, a film and TV one. That goes through it. And I really wanted to, I'm very keen on picking up on what Elizabeth was talking about earlier, the idea of desensitizing the students so that when they walk into the exam, it's second nature. And the word I use is instinct. I've been joking with my kids, I want to be the voice in their head that Mr. Tooley said I do this first, and Mr. Tooley said I do that. And I've got a eclectic group of kids. I've got kids that are absolutely passionate about classical music. I've got contemporary guitarists. I've got some singers, I've got some composers. So I've had to sort of really look at how can I help everyone use their strengths. And what I'm worried about the most with my students is that when they walk in and look at the stimulus material, if they don't find something that they love or they engage with that's in their mindset or in their genres that they love, how the hell do I get through putting something together and not panicking in the moment and going, oh my God, I have no idea about how Nigel Westlake's score will work, or please don't show me, a piece of Stephen Leake. I have no concept of that. So what can I do and how can I build some instinct? So what we want to be able to do is have a little bit of, it's a mantra, a little bit of a way, but it's also some language. So we try to really cover the basics so that we can get everyone on the same page, so that in their work, whenever they want to have a look at the EA, they've got a section of slides they can go back to and find all of our notes, so that we can go, this is what you've got to do. Here are the absolute basics of it all. Obviously teasing out all of the assessment objectives. We're about to start looking at the difference between music extension and music. We've kept music extension IA3, so we're just finishing that off now. So taking analyze out and putting examine in, and making sure that the 3 kids that do next out of my class do know what the differences are when they're looking to write for either ones. Then I wanted to break the process down, and I wanted to make it as not wordy as much as I possibly could, to just give them some simple dot points to go with it all. So I sat there and thought about, okay, if I sat in this exam, what would be the steps I'd have to go through to get from sitting down, opening up the paper, to walking out afterwards and feeling like my world hadn't come crashing down around me. So we've been looking at question deconstruction, which is a little bit of what Janette and Elizabeth picked up on, and being able to look at those viewpoints, the cognitive verbs, the question cues, the bold words, all the things that if you've taught QCS before, or if you've been part of looking at some of the training QCAA's done, it's all sitting there. We're knee deep in stimulus interrogation at the moment, trying to get through all of that stimulus. I don't have a lot of kids that are avid score readers, so when they got the El Koenig and they got Forrest Gump thrown at them, it was a little bit of a worry. And my favorite was that when I started playing the music and they listened to the score, there were some aha moments, and that's a really nice thing, that they sort of went, oh, that's what that is, and they understood that they knew it, because a lot of my kids work orally rather than visually. So we've been doing a lot of work on interrogating the stimulus, being able to select and what we're going to use to justify. We've been talking about response planning. At the moment, I've given my kids basically a formula for the introduction, 3 sentences, one that relates to the question, what elements are they using, and what stimulus are they using, so that we can move through the things that are lower marks and make sure that they've got time to get into the stuff that does from the AMG really does actually add weight to the number of that they receive at the end of it all. So we've been looking at structuring and sequencing, draft, proofing, and final. I'm still on the fence about getting the kids to do a full draft or do a final. You know, I resonate a lot with what Janette said, maybe more planning time and more stimulus interrogation time is more important than perhaps writing it out and then adding a final copy in and proofing. I'm probably lucky, most of my kids are pretty literate. I've got a few kids that do literature, so I'm not necessarily having to worry about them not being able to sort of knock out something decent. We've obviously talked about, Miriam shared it in the quote in the chat before, letting the kids write on every second line. So if they wanted to add something in or annotate something, they've got some room to do it. The good old adage of you can't take whiteout in anyway, but don't use whiteout, just put a single line through it, because if it's good information, you know, it still might get picked up. So we've been trying to unpack the process. The human factors is where we're at, and I'll be going to that website Liz shared earlier once I finish here having a look at this. I think honestly half our battle is going to be helping them get the right mindset, helping them have skills to deal with anxiety, helping them have the stamina and the well-being that goes along with it. If they've got all of those sorts of things right, then when they walk in the room, they can zone in and be very focused in on the things that can do it. And this is where us as a faculty are going to work collaboratively together to give these broad sets of skills. And my visual art teacher's got some really interesting things on mindset and well-being, and my drama teacher has a lot on anxiety and stamina, because obviously it comes from different fields, and a couple of my staff are also English teachers, so we've been drawing some of their work in as well. Then what I wanted to do was, okay, so when I have to deconstruct the question, what does that mean? I have students who I can say, yeah, deconstruct it, they go away, they do it. I have some kids that will sit there very blankly and go, what do you mean? So what I tried to do is try to pick out, how does it relate to the stimulus? What is the viewpoint? Some questions and key things they can ask themselves to help unpack the question, and as they annotate and go through everything there. So what, again, is the idea of that little voice of Mr. Tooley over my shoulder going, okay, I do this now, then I do that now, in order to really have that instinct, and the idea of being able to be desensitized to the stress that comes from it all. We then looked at in stimulus interrogation. So, and I use the word interrogation because we want them to be discerning, and we want them to actually pick really very valuable pieces of information. And I'm also really urging my kids to be mindful that the song that they really like in the exam and the stimulus may not be the one that they have the most information about in order to accurately answer the question. And so the idea of making sure that they've been careful with it. And Liz picked up on that earlier in her steps, the idea of macro and micro listening, of listening for the big picture around it and then going in for the detail and looking at it in layers. Which are the prominent elements of music. I really wish they'd use Norton scores in the stimulus with a little grayed out section and a little white little thingo. The kids found that really helpful with the idea of tracking the main melodic ideas as they went through and did that. One of the things I did do with my score reading, the first thing I said to my kids was, one of the first things you must do is press play on the stimulus, open the score, and put a time code at the top of every page, so that when they were coming back and going for a look, they could go, okay, there was something at 30 seconds in Forrest Gump. I don't have to go back to the beginning of the stimulus and read all my way through. I can go, okay, cool, page 5 is 30 seconds. I'm going to start there and go. So we've practiced putting a time code at the top of every page, because the stimulus is all bar numbers are all put in for you, but then to link it up to the audio so that we're not wasting time or getting lost in a moment or getting sidetracked, there are actually some really key signposts along the way to do it. How the elements being used, well, that's where we're working at the moment. Use of elements in relation to the key idea, locate and document specific examples, and collate and categorize. And I've got a little graphic organizer I created for that. We've just been working through. I'll share in a minute. Stimulus sample selection. What I want them to do is, again, make sure they've got the right piece of stimulus. They've got what they're doing. How many examples? What are the most relevant? What are the most appropriate? I'm really trying to hope that my kids don't just simply all talk about timbre because it's the easiest one for them to listen to, because it's very much a listening one as well. I'm really making sure that they can delve into harmony, they can delve into tonality and be really mindful of the important things as well. What we've also talked about with the stimulus is when we're listening is to highlight where things change. So often if you look, or if you take the Koenig as an example of this, of what everyone's been looking at the moment, and the public one, where most of the key points are that you can talk about the idea of journey or idea of motif, it's where the music changes and where something new happens or something stops happening. And so if they want to listen to start finding some signposts and viewpoints in order to go further into the stimulus, it changes here. Oh, I need to go and listen to that, or something different happens there. The Forrest Gump one's a really good example of it. The melody flows along, and all of a sudden the whole section comes in, the strings drop out. There's some different points. They can see the textural changes really quite quickly. We're in response planning mode at the moment. We use TEAL, PEAL. There's a whole heap of different acronyms. My kids are getting caught up in all of that. And I've said to them, look, it's an analytical essay. If you're used to using a certain structure, use it. This is what it means in music. And so for us, really, it's about helping them with their strengths. So that's the little guide at the moment. I still need to refine that a little. What we have been just working through, hold on, if I find my next one is this one here. So the idea behind this graphic organizer is, now I'm doing stimulus 1, stimulus 2, and 2 elements for each. So that's the track, that's the what I'm doing, the way I'm setting my kids up so that they've got information. So what I'd like them to do is have this table drawn in to their planning document, so that as they finish reading the question, reading the context, and interrogating the stimulus, before they go anywhere near their response, they put this little summary together that can sit on the front of their page and be their checkpoint as well as we go through. So we've just done the public one. So if I was doing the journey question for the public question there, I'm going to use Koenig as my first example. I'm going to use Forrest Gump as my next. That way they know the name of the composer, they've got the name of the piece in front of them. They don't have to keep flicking back and forth between pages to find it all. What element are they focusing on? Where are the time codes or the bar numbers? What's the specific musical feature? And then how does it relate to the viewpoint? So that as they unpack their sentence, unpack their paragraph, they can go, okay, cool, I haven't done this bit. I need to put this piece of information in. I need to put that piece of information in. What I want them to do is sort of have this summary in front of them as they go. We've had a lot of discussion about, do the elements need to be the same for stimulus 1 and stimulus 2? And because there's not a compare and contrast question, we've actually been sitting and saying, look, you might find that for stimulus 1, timbre and pitch, and particularly harmony is really important, but for stimulus 2, duration and structure might be more appropriate for you, so that you can actually do it, because what they're looking for is using both pieces of evidence to support what they've done. So that was a little graphic organizer that seems to be working okay. I haven't marked their responses to that one yet, so I might be talking out of school at the moment. The last final thing I'd like to share is, let me go into here. So we have an LMS, it's Schoolbox. Most schools have something similar to that. This is our class page. We've had the same page for the last 2 years. What I've done now, all respect to Cade, I love these posters, and so I hope many of you have seen this before. Cade very willingly shares this. This has helped me with my kids put a visual that means something to the concept of the elements, so that, you know, when we're talking about expressive devices, they get these ideas and they can see very clearly what they are. What our site allows us to do is, if I click on duration, it then takes us into ELR and all of the stuff on duration, so that the kids, so we're starting to hyperlink bits and pieces together. There is a really good resource on one of the Facebook pages that a teacher has done, where there's all 4 units and all the concepts listed, and then there's hyperlinks to each word on there as well, which would be a really handy one to have a look at. And finally, the one thing I'm toying with at the moment that I haven't had a chance to finish off yet, and my dog's barking at something, is Quizlet. If you're looking for something to use to help with memory recall, to help with definitions of words, there is a heap of things you can do in Quizlet. You can also create all of your own. The thing about Quizlet is the kids can use it on their phone or their iPad. It's not device, it's device neutral. And you may find that if you sit and create a couple of things like, that's what's already in there for music, you can build a whole collection of elements, of compositional devices, of simple terms to help them all along. So that's me done, Malcolm. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Shane. That's wonderful. So many great ideas in there. Especially like, well, I like a lot of them, but the way you're working across with the other arts subjects, I think that's a really great collaborative idea to hone in on there. And also the difference between music and mechs is also a good one. So there's clarity in students' minds. So fantastic. Aware of the time, we're going to move straight on now. And our final presenter today is Dr. Jason Goopy. He is Head of the Arts and Choral Conductor at Ambrose Tracy College in Brisbane. He has 13 years full-time experience teaching music in combined primary and secondary schools in Queensland. His QCAA experience is that he's previously on music and music extension panels. Currently is an endorser for music extension, lead confirmer for music, and an external marker for music. Jason is also a sessional academic at the University of Queensland and Griffith University in initial music teacher education, and is currently president of CODI Australia and is a member of the ASME Queensland Chapter Council. So welcome to Jason for our final presentation.
Thank you, Malcolm, and hello everybody. It's great to be here, and it's so inspiring to see all of the work that's going on around Queensland for our students. I hope they realise how lucky they are to have such amazing pedagogues working with them. It's really interesting that we've been previously hearing about instinct and mindset for musicology, and we didn't actually know what each other were talking about, and I decided to talk about musicology or musicological mindset briefly this afternoon. And that's something that I've been working on. And I guess what I wanted to start with is just looking at the big picture, and that it's multifaceted, and all the approaches that I've taken to looking at musicology. There's so many things that are going on, both in the classroom, in terms of on a daily basis, but in terms of a macro level as well across the program. And I guess I just wanted to highlight and acknowledge that as well, that these are the things that are going on for years and years and years to sort of prepare these students for the exam, which I'm sure all of you are doing. One of the big focuses that I'm doing for my students is normalising and valuing musicology. And it's not something that we need to do for an exam, it's something that we want to do. So I'm trying to motivate an intrinsic interest in this particular domain for them. We're doing lots of sharing and discussing music, and it's actually a fun thing to do, and students can enjoy that. Being able to articulate music viewpoints is a valuable skill as a musician, and we want that in terms of employability and in terms of skills beyond school. So I'm trying to connect it to real life as well. Music and appreciation and enjoyment is enhanced by listening to the finer details. And then musicology development can inform and enhance performance and composition, and all students can be successful. And like all skills, it just takes deliberate time and energy to develop. So there's some of the underlying values that underpin the work that's going on, obviously not only in my classroom, but I can see happening in all of our classrooms around the state. These are things that we already know. All of this work is underpinned by music knowledge, skills and understanding, music elements and compositional devices framework. And I'm finding that I'm constantly having to go back and reinforce what are the elements of music? What are the compositional devices? What do they mean? How do we apply them? How do we use them? What are the words associated with those ideas? The cognitive verbs, obviously, what's the difference between analyze and evaluate? How do you justify? How do you explain? And obviously a lot of work around speaking and writing. And I'm finding, particularly with my students, that helping them able to articulate their view in a verbal communication sense really assists them when it comes to written skills. If you can say it to each other, and it's a lot easier than trying to write it. And we've been building up, starting with words, terminology, understanding what those words mean, putting them in sentences, paragraphs and essays. And obviously that's a sequence that's not just in year 12, but spanning from year 4 to 12 in my particular context. One of my students at the parent-teacher interviews recently said, we've been told, sir, that we have to do study of every subject every day, half an hour every day or whatever. And he said, well, what do we do? And I said, well, that's a very fair question. And so we've been talking in class lately about what can you do in your everyday life in practicing for musicology. And it sounds maybe a bit bizarre, but having thought about it, and these are what the students themselves came up with, these are things they can do every day. So I want them to actively listen to new music, unfamiliar music, and start to think about the cognitions and the processes revolving around the music elements and compositional devices in those specific pieces. After all, the musicology exam is assessing their ability to think. So I want them to have conversations with their peers studying music, and I want them to write down ideas that they like in the piece and then go on to explain to them. They've all got Spotify in my class on different devices going on, so I actively want them to listen to new music once a day, and it could be while they're going to and from school. Some of them walk, some of them get public transport, some of them drive. And we've had a discussion about listening to music while you drive and the safety around that. But that's, again, a great opportunity for students to be actively engaging and seeking out new music, discovering and broadening their horizons, but also applying the thinking skills in their everyday listening while they're exercising, while they're chilling. Actively notice and listen to music that occurs in their life throughout the day, such as watching TV or in shopping centres. Also, during rehearsals or music lessons they're involved in, you could scheme possible exam questions and responses during the breaks. So again, I'm trying to normalise, and this is an everyday activity that exists beyond the classroom that students can do at any time, absent of me. I'm really trying to set them up to be independent musicology thinkers. In terms of perhaps some weekly activities they could do, they could practice writing exam questions. I've been teaching my boys about the structure of possible types of exam questions. And so I believe if they're able to write their own exam questions, they're really going to understand how to answer what comes in front of them. But both known and unknown repertoire. Obviously, the practice of planning responses, which we've had a lot of work about before, which has been fantastic. Practice writing parts of responses. So while rather than doing the whole thing, as we've heard before, breaking the response down into smaller pieces and really doing in-depth focus on particular areas. And we were talking about at one point, if they did 20 minutes a day across 6 days a week, they'd cover all the elements. They could do a different stimuli for each thing. So again, these are ideas that my students were coming up with about what they could do to study for the exam beyond the classroom as well, in addition to what we were doing. As an example of one activity that we're doing, because obviously we're just about to run out of time, but one thing that we've been doing, even today, for instance, we were looking at stars from Les Mis, and we've been immersing ourselves in the repertoire and learning that and performing it, because we want to keep doing things musically, both in performance and composition, despite an exam coming up. We've been having discussions as a class and drawing out different aspects of the piece that are drawing to us. I said to my students at one point, name me your favorite part of the piece. And then it was immediately followed, of course, with why. Let's look at why that's your favorite part. What's actually going on? And Stars from Les Mis is the perfect example of the harmony being so sophisticated and so well written to reinforce and support the message of the lyrics going on. Then they've chosen to write a body paragraph, one element and two specific examples, perhaps. And then what we've been doing is a blind peer review. So students aren't writing their name, they're handwriting a response, and I collect that without their name. And I've also been saying phrases like, give the quality feedback your classmate deserves, maybe not necessarily what you would give yourself. So I'm really trying to set a high bar for them, and they're providing strengths, the areas for improvement or development. And we've also been marking against the marking guide. Again, if they can be the marker of their own exams, they then know how to write for it. And they've been saying that's been very valuable to them. I've also been doing, perhaps that word you hear from the QCAA, some calibration of their feedback. Sometimes their feedback, they're not markers, they're not teachers, they don't know how to do these things. So I've just been helping them become a marker. And then, of course, it's returned to them for some reflection and implementation as well. So this is one activity that I'm working on at the moment that my students are finding really helpful for them. As well, obviously, as we have all done, I've been doing some stealthy preparation through previous assessment. Obviously, there is the option to do spoken or written explanation, but I've been asking my students to do written explanations all the time, just to help them practice using music terminology, getting into the habit of explaining what's going on, even in their own work. My students have been doing digital books, and again, the practice of writing musicology. So all these things have been leading up to practice and mock exams. And that's sort of my little moment that I wanted to share with you today.
Thank you very much. It's wonderful. Thank you so much, Jason. And your comment absolutely about today's session, it's been so rich and valuable. and I thank all presenters. Some great ideas there, Jason. I like writing your own exam questions. Normalising and valuing musicology is a good one. I guess the term musicology in itself sounds so scientific, but actually what we're doing is understanding music so much better. So lots of great ideas there. And we will have a recording of this so we can take more time to go back through all of this and absorb it all, because I know there's lots of ideas there that I want to absorb. And so once again, a huge thank you to our presenters, Liz, Janette, Meagan, Shane, and Jason. And also like to acknowledge the fine work of Sarah Fry, the ASME Queensland PD coordinator, who organised this event, put it all together, contacted all the presenters, and also to our president, Dr. Rachel Dwyer, also for her assistance. So best wishes everybody for your journey to the EA and beyond. And maybe we can share again after it's all over. If you know other music teachers who are not members of ASME, well, let's fly the flag. Great work, everyone.